Hello everyone! So today I want to talk about Ganondorf from The Legend of Zelda. So here's the gist. Ganondorf is the main antagonist of the Legend of Zelda series and is best known for holding the Triforce of Power. But to get the full story we'll have to go back many years before the original Ganondorf was even born. So in Skyward Sword we meet the Demon King Demise. Now Demise fought the goddess Hylia to try to get access to the Triforce. At the end of Skyward Sword, spoiler alert for a 10-year-old game, Link defeats Demise, but Demise swears that his hatred will be reborn and reincarnated in the future to fight against the descendants of those with the blood of the goddess and the spirit of the hero, being Zelda and Link respectively. And of course, that premonition comes true in the form of Ganondorf. Now I'm going to work through all of the sightings of Ganondorf or his beast form Ganon throughout the Legend of Zelda timeline. So we're just going to go chronologically. The first time chronologically that we see Ganondorf is during the Ocarina of Time. At this time he is the leader of the Gerudo tribe and his sworn fealty to the King of Hyrule. Ganondorf was of course not actually loyal to the king and was just using this as an opportunity to look for the 3 spiritual stones across Hyrule. Now the guardians of these stones would not give the stones to him, so he put death curses on both the Great Deku Tree and Lord Jabu Jabu, and he also put a large boulder in front of Dodongo's cavern, cutting off the Gorons from their main source of food. A young Princess Zelda at this time could tell that Ganondorf had evil intentions, and so when she meets Link, she asks Link to help her take him down. While Link is out gathering the spiritual stones, Ganondorf launches an assault against Hyrule Castle. When Link is returning to Castletown with all 3 of the stones, we see Impa and Zelda leaving Castletown, and Ganondorf is right behind them. Now Ganondorf asks Link where the 2 headed, and Link of course doesn't tell him, so Ganondorf throws Link to the side and goes to pursue the 2 women. Ganondorf doesn't actually leave, of course, and we see that Ganondorf actually follows Link to the Temple of Time and sneaks into the Sacred Realm after Link opens it. Ganondorf makes his way into the Sacred Realm to try to obtain the Triforce. When he touches the Triforce though, because his soul is out of balance, the Triforce breaks into 3 pieces, leaving him with only the Triforce of Power. At this point, Link goes to sleep for 7 years and Ganondorf uses the Triforce of Power to conquer Hyrule. We see him transform the Hyrule Castle into Ganondorf's tower, and we also see him leave Castletown in ruins and full of redeads. Ganondorf's main goal at this point is to obtain the other 2 pieces of the Triforce, but luckily Zelda is able to evade him for these 7 years, and Link isn't there because he's sleeping in the Temple of Time. Now after these 7 years, Ganondorf finds Zelda and Link at the Temple of Time and kidnaps Zelda, daring Link to come to his tower to come and save her. Ganondorf waits in his tower for Link to come face him, and when they do finally face off, Link is of course victorious, and Ganondorf, being the sore loser that he is, brings his entire tower crumbling down, hoping that the destruction will kill Link and Zelda. The 2 of them escape, but when they reach the base of the tower, we see that Ganondorf also survived, and he turns into his beast form, Ganon. During this fight, Ganon defeats Link, leaving Zelda and the other sages in charge of sealing him away so that he can do no more harm. Zelda and the other sages are able to trap Ganon in the Dark World, but Ganondorf manages to take the Triforce with him. This leads us to the Downfall timeline. Now the first game in this timeline is A Link to the Past, and here we see that Ganon has been waiting for many years in the Dark World, and finally gets help from the wizard Aghanim to try to help him get back to the Light World where Hyrule is. Aghanim gathers up the descendants of the sages, which are referred to as the 7 maidens, and he sends them to the Dark World in order to release Ganon back to the Light World. Eventually, Link and Ganon clash in the Pyramid of Power in the Dark World, and even though Ganon has the entire Triforce, Link is still able to defeat him. Our next encounter with Ganon is in the Oracle of Seasons and Oracle of Ages game. In this game, Kume and Kotake, who in Ocarina of Time were sort of Ganondorf's adoptive mothers and also combined to form Twinrova, they have set out to resurrect Ganon. Their plan was to kidnap Zelda and use her as a sacrifice in order to resurrect him. Fortunately, Link is able to save Zelda, so that sacrifice doesn't happen, and Kume and Kotake end up sacrificing themselves instead. Now, because this sacrifice didn't go quite as planned, Ganon is resurrected, but he comes back as sort of a mindless beast, and not the clever, manipulative Ganon that we're used to seeing at this point. But hey, Link defeats him and everything's good. The next time we see Ganon is in A Link Between Worlds, and Link sees visions of Ganon in his nightmares, foretelling his return to Hyrule. Meanwhile, an evil wizard named Yuga is capturing the 7 sages in portraits, and he brings them to Lorule in order to use their power to bring Ganon back. Now, not only does he successfully resurrect Ganon, but he also merges with Ganon in order to create the being known as Yuga Ganon. Can't say that name doesn't make sense. Yuga Ganon attempts to attack Link, but Hilda jumps in at the last moment to save him so that Link can go save the sages and also obtain the Triforce of Courage. While Link is off doing this, Yuga Ganon remains in Lorule and prepares to return to Hyrule. And once Link has obtained the Triforce of Courage, he goes back to Lorule to meet Hilda, but spoiler alert for an 8-year-old game, Hilda is on Yuga Ganon's side and summons him to attack Link. Now, at the point where Yuga Ganon is nearly defeated by Link, Hilda asks him to give her the Triforce of Power. But Yuga Ganon, of course, pulls an old switcheroo and turns Hilda into a painting, taking her Triforce of Wisdom. In the end, though, Ganon is really defeated by Link, although his soul survives. That brings us to the original Legend of Zelda game. Now, in this game, Ganon is resurrected once again and leads an army on an invasion of Lesser Hyrule to find the Triforce of Power. Next, he tries to go obtain the Triforce of Wisdom, but Princess Zelda is able to break it into 8 pieces and scatters those pieces all across Hyrule. Ganon captures Zelda and holds her hostage under Spectacle Rock, and also sends his minions out after Impa, who Zelda had sent to go look for someone that could help them. Eventually, after Link recovers the pieces of the Triforce of Wisdom, he comes to Ganon's lair, destroys Ganon, and turns him into ash using the silver arrows. Now, next up is the adventure of Link. We don't really see Ganon in this game, but we do see that his minions are trying to resurrect him using his ashes left over from the previous game. Their plan is to use Link's blood mixed with Ganon's ashes to resurrect Ganon. Now, this doesn't actually happen during the game, but you can see this happening anytime Link dies during the game with the game over screen. This brings us to the child timeline. Ganondorf waits in his tower for Link to come face him, and when they do finally face off, Link is of course victorious, and Ganondorf, being the sore loser that he is, brings his entire tower crumbling down, hoping that the destruction will kill Link and Zelda. The two of them escape, but when they reach the base of the tower, we see that Ganondorf also survived, and he turns into his beast form, Ganon. Link and Zelda are able to work together to defeat Ganondorf, and Zelda sends Link back in time so that he can stop Ganondorf before he ever conquers Hyrule. Now, the first time we see Ganon in this timeline is in Twilight Princess. In Twilight Princess, we learn that after the events of Ocarina of Time, Ganondorf was put on trial for betraying the crown, and he was sentenced to be executed by the sages. The sages plunged a sword called the Sword of 6 Sages into Ganondorf's chest, but the Triforce of Power that he still held kept him from actually dying. He broke free of his chains and actually killed one of the sages in the process. The rest of the sages felt that their only choice was to open up the Mirror of Twilight and send him through it to the Twilight Realm. Now, while he was in the Twilight Realm, Ganondorf was able to regain his strength by feeding on the hatred of the Twilight. He also began to manipulate one of the Twilight named Zant, who had tried and failed to become the king of the Twilight. He also granted Zant a portion of his power so that he could become the king and then invade Hyrule. Ganondorf was planning on using this invasion as his own way to get back to Hyrule so that he could, of course, try to take over the world again. So Zant kept Link busy fighting while Ganondorf made his way to Hyrule Castle, incapacitated Zelda, and then took her throne for himself. When Link arrived at the castle, Ganondorf possessed Zelda's body and used her as a puppet to fight against Link. Eventually, though, Link was able to force his spirit out of her body, and so Ganondorf took the form of a giant boar. Link was able to take advantage of the giant gash left in Ganondorf's chest by his failed execution, and Link was able to defeat this form as well. After his beast form was defeated, Ganon transformed into sort of the spectral, fiery vision of his own head, and Midna quickly teleported Link and Zelda out of the castle before taking on a spidery form herself and taking Ganon on. Ganondorf is able to beat Midna really quickly and returns to his Gerudo form. We see him riding his horse away from Hyrule Castle, holding Midna's fused shadow that she usually wore on her head. Ganondorf crushes the fused shadow and then rushes toward Link and Zelda on his horse. Link and Zelda hop onto Epona and a fight begins on horseback. Eventually, after some arrows are thrown his way, Ganondorf finally falls off of his horse, and him and Link are able to engage in one-on-one, just sword combat. Link, of course, wins this battle and plunges his sword into Ganondorf's existing wound and ends the battle for good. With his dying breath, Ganondorf predicts that his reincarnations will continue to fight Link and Zelda's descendants, and warns that the history of light and shadow will be written in blood before succumbing to his wounds and dying. The next time we see Ganondorf is in Four Swords Adventure. This takes place hundreds of years after Twilight Princess, and Ganondorf has again been reincarnated as a Gerudo, but he's been exiled from his tribe for plotting to overthrow the king. He manages to steal a powerful trident as well as a dark mirror. He uses the dark mirror to summon Shadow Link, and then commands Shadow Link to trick regular Link into pulling the Four Sword, releasing Vati from it. Ganondorf then uses his trident to kill the Knights of Hyrule, turning them into demons, and turns the royal jewels into gateways to the Dark World. Ganon then absorbs a bunch of power from the Shrine Maidens who had been imprisoned in the Dark World. At the end of the game, Ganondorf faces off against Link, but Link is able to defeat him and seal him within the Four Sword. That brings us to the adult timeline. Ganondorf waits in his tower for Link to come face him, and when they do finally face off, Link is of course victorious, and Ganondorf, being the sore loser that he is, brings his entire tower crumbling down, hoping that the destruction will kill Link and Zelda. The two of them escape, but when they reach the base of the tower, we see that Ganondorf also survived, and he turns into his beast form, Ganon. Link and Zelda are able to work together to defeat Ganon, and then Zelda sends Link back in time 7 years so that he can stop Ganondorf before he ever conquers Hyrule. In this timeline that Link left, Zelda and the other sages seal Ganon within the Sacred Realm, but their timeline is left without a hero. Now, the only game in the adult timeline that we see Ganondorf in is Wind Waker. The intro of Wind Waker tells us the story of Ganon breaking from his seal and rising again to conquer Hyrule. This time though, no hero came to save Hyrule, and the gods were forced to flood the entire land to keep Ganon from destroying everything. Ganon was able to break free from this hold also, and he retreated to the Forsaken Fortress, where he began to raise his army. He sent the Helmarok King out across the Great Sea looking for young girls with pointy ears, hoping that eventually the Helmarok King would bring Zelda back to him and he would be able to steal the Triforce of Wisdom. Now, he ends up kidnapping Link's sister Errol, and so naturally, Link shows up at the Forsaken Fortress to try to get her back. This is really early in the game though, and Link is no match for Ganondorf at this point. So the Helmarok King picks up Link and tosses him out into the Great Sea. Even Ganondorf wasn't at his full power yet because a lot of it was being sealed away by the Master Sword deep under the ocean in ancient Hyrule. Link shows up and pulls the Master Sword out of its pedestal, releasing the rest of Ganondorf's power. Ganondorf is again confronted by Link at the Forsaken Fortress, but Link's attempts to attack him are useless. Ganondorf lets him know that the Master Sword has lost it the power to banish evil. This is of course because earlier Ganondorf murdered the Wind Sage and the Earth Sage, which were protecting the power of the Master Sword. Valoo and some of the Rito come save Link and Zelda from the Forsaken Fortress before Ganondorf is able to just kill them, but Ganondorf does see a piece of the Triforce around Tetra's neck, puts two and two together, and realizes that Tetra is Zelda. Ganondorf is able to locate the safe haven that Link and Tetra were using and the place where Tetra was staying for safekeeping, and kidnaps her, bringing her to his tower. Ganondorf is watching over a sleeping Tetra and looking into her dreams when Link finds them. And Ganondorf creates a large puppet that looks like his beast form and sends it to attack Link. After Link defeats this puppet Ganon, Ganondorf again reappears and he is holding Tetra under his arm, and he takes her up to the very roof of his tower. When Link reaches the top of the tower, Ganondorf does some villain monologuing about how he was raised in the harsh Gerudo Desert and he just wanted to take over a nice green place like Hyrule. Can you blame the guy? Now, Ganondorf has already taken the Triforce of Wisdom from Tetra, and he very quickly attacks Link, taking the Triforce of Courage from him as well. With all the pieces of the Triforce reunited and within his reach, Ganondorf turns to touch the Triforce, but sees that King Daphnis no Hansen Hyrule has already touched the Triforce before he got a chance to. Now, the last king of Hyrule wishes for the sea to swallow up this ancient kingdom for good, and we see water begin to pour down through the barrier that was previously protecting Hyrule from being drowned out. Link wakes up, and Ganondorf and Link face off for the final time. In what's probably a really gruesome ending for such a whimsical looking game, the Master Sword gets plunged into Ganondorf's forehead by Link, and he begins to turn to stone. Ganondorf is killed and ultimately swallowed up by the Great Sea. Now bringing all three paths of the timeline together is Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild is the most recent appearance of Ganon in the form of Calamity Ganon. Calamity Ganon is described as the result of Ganon completely foregoing his humanity to embrace pure hatred. 10,000 years before the events of Breath of the Wild, Calamity Ganon appears to destroy the world. Now luckily, the Sheikah are able to create an army consisting of guardians and also 4 divine beasts in order to oppose him. Ganondorf was overcome by these forces and sealed beneath Hyrule Castle, but we've all seen how well sealing up Ganon works. And he lay dormant until 100 years before Breath of the Wild. A prophecy warned that he would return, so the people of Hyrule once again raised the army that had been able to defeat him all those years ago. When the Calamity did finally break free, he was ready for this army though, and he was able to infect every single guardian with his malice. And he also sent extensions of himself in the form of the Blight Ganons to the 4 divine beasts. He used these Blight Ganons to kill the beast champions and then corrupt the beasts themselves. With Link mortally wounded and sent to the Shrine of Resurrection, Zelda returns to her former home and seals herself in the castle with Calamity Ganon, keeping them both there for the next 100 years. Ganon remains in the castle attempting to regain a physical form for himself until Link finally arrives in the Sanctum. The first form in which we fight Calamity Ganon is this really grotesque kind of mixture of Ganondorf and malice and also Sheikah technology. After this form of Ganon is defeated, his spirit escapes to Hyrule Field, where he takes on the form of an enormous, malice-ridden boar. Link and Zelda work together to defeat this form of him, and he seems to truly be gone at this point. So that's everything that we've seen of Ganon/Ganondorf so far in the Legend of Zelda series. But of course, there's the issue of Breath of the Wild 2. We see a sort of decrepit, mummified version of Ganondorf underneath the castle in this trailer, and he seems to be coming back to life at this point. I'm not sure where that's gonna go, but I'm very excited for it. That's everything I've got for you today. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you liked it. Go ahead and leave me a comment if you want to chat with me or to leave me any suggestions of future ideas you want to see in a video. I really love The Legend of Zelda. It's my favorite video game franchise, so I would really like to do more videos about it. I'm super excited about this one. I'm going to be posting videos every Wednesday, so make sure to check back if you want to see another video game lore video, and I'll see you next time. Bye!